character. If you can only make it to one of them, perhaps this is the one. Kaas, anger. And perhaps also the opposite midah, which we'll be talking about next week. I think next week is midat simcha, happiness. Anger, kaas, is one of the most destructive, perhaps the most destructive midah of all, for himself, emotionally, physically, and for society as a whole. And that is why the Zohar says that whoever possesses this particular midah, this characteristic called kaas, anger, what he actually has in him is a building block for causing harm, tremendous amount of harm. One who has this midah, rabbis tell us, is very close to always committing mistakes as a result of that, and committing avirot, transgressions as well. And that is why the rabbis tell us in a saying, lo tirtah velo tehteh. Don't get angry, so that you should not sin. Avoid getting angry, so you should not make mistakes. As the pasuk says, uval hema rav pasha. Whoever is a temperamental person, rav hema, not that he gets angry once in a while, rav hema, on a regular basis is a temperamental person, rav pasha. You can expect that he has on his record many transgressions. What kind of damage does this anger do? Most of you are familiar with what anger does, obviously. But what is not known is the Kabbalistic explanation of where anger comes from and what it does to an individual. So I want to spend a few minutes on that because that is extremely important in order that we have a deeper understanding of what this midah is all about. The Zohar says that anger actually does a tremendous amount of damage to the neshama. On the level of the soul, it does tremendous damage. In the words of the Zohar, a person who gets angry, oker et hakdusha shebenishmato, he's like uprooting the holiness that was residing within him because of his neshama. And instead of that holiness, he brings in its place tum'ah. He brings in himself impurity of the form of avodah zarah, of idol worshipping. And because of that, the Kabbalistic explanation of the verse Al tifnu el ha'elilim, which means don't turn to idols, also means to say don't look at a person who's always angry. Don't look at idols. Don't look at avodah zarah. In the same way, don't look at an individual who is very, very angry because the tum'ah is on him. The sitra hara, the impure forces are on him. And whoever is angry all the time, the rabbis tell us, don't even befriend him. Don't be his partner. Don't have anything to do with him. You will only lose by befriending, by associating with a temperamental person. Another pasuk that pretty much conveys the same idea is lo yeh becha el zar. Even though the simple words, the simple interpretation of that verse is that you should not have within you, amongst you, a foreign god. Obviously, Judaism does not tolerate idol worshipping. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. We only have one God, and it's a terrible sin in any way to get involved with any other cult and religion. But the deeper meaning, according to the Kabbalah of Lo Yeh Becha El Zar, is don't introduce in yourself a foreign god. How do you introduce in yourself a foreign god? By introducing anger. Why is anger compared to a foreign god? Why is it being compared so much to avodah zarah, to idol worshipping? Why is it being so much associated with tumah, with impurities? Anger. Because the rabbis tell us one who gets angry, it is a form of heresy. It is like he's rebelling against Hashem. He somehow loses track, he loses control. And when a person loses control of himself, he has lost pretty much his beautiful gift of free will, of intelligence, of the divine neshama that he has in him. And instead of that, of using all that, he has allowed himself to be controlled, to be hypnotized, if you want to use that word, or being taken over temporarily by the impure forces. So by allowing anger to take over, by losing control, we are introducing, in some ways, an El Zar, a foreign god. And that is why he is compared to someone who is worshipping idols. Worshipping, in this case, anger. Anger being this idol that he's giving so much credence to, that he basically says, yeah, you take over, you control me. I'm not going to control myself. Obviously, he's doing that in a subconscious level. But this is exactly what happens when somebody loses control. And because of that, the Zohar continues on to say, when one loses control, the Kedusha is removed, and in place of the Kedusha comes the Tum'ah. And this Tum'ah, this impurity, is worse than the Tum'ah of dead animals, worse than the Tum'ah that affect people exteriorly. They become Tameh. They have to go to the mikveh. This Tum'ah affects a person internally. So it is a worse form of Tum'ah of impurity than the Tum'ah that we're familiar with. The Zohar goes on to say that if he, in his anger, were to throw something or tear something, in other words, do an act from his anger, during his anger, it is even worse. It is as though he is then bringing a sacrifice to that Avodah Zarah, to the idol. And of course, all that has tremendous repercussions that we can't even imagine what that does to him, to his future, to his soul, unless he somehow corrects it. I just wanted for you to briefly get an idea, a glimpse of what the Zohar says, that this causes tremendous damage also on the level of the soul. What other damage does it do? Rabbis tell us, Im chachamhu chochmato mistaleket mimeno. If he was a wise man, if he learned a lot, the anger, causes him to forget his learning. If he was a navi, if he was a prophet, it causes him to lose his prophecy. And this one is obviously simple, because when we spoke about prophecy in the past, one of the conditions for becoming a prophet is to be happy, to be in a good mood, to be calm. And that is why some prophets would have music all the time around them, so that they can be in the right mood to be able to receive the prophecy. One who, of course, gets angry, which is the exact opposite, drives away the prophecy if he was in fact a prophet. And this could happen. But that's what he would do. That's what he would end up doing. Rabbis tell us that physically, a person who gets angry is a very sick person. One of the peoples, there's various people that the Gemara lists that have a miserable life, a very difficult life. And one of them is, of course, one who has a bad wife, gives him a hard time. Another one is a person who's obviously physically ill. There's all kinds of people whose life is miserable, very difficult. One of them is those people who are always getting angry. Those people who are always getting angry have a very, very miserable, difficult life. Chayehem, they say, enam chayim. Their life is not a life. Imagine getting upset about everything. We're not talking about somebody that gets upset once in a while. Remember, we're talking about somebody right now who has a large dose of anger. He's a very temperamental person. He has a miserable life. And whoever is infected with this midah, because he will have trouble admitting the truth, correcting his wrongs, getting along with people, accepting criticism, this midah will give him a hard time in all those areas. Because of that, he's going to have a hard time doing teshuvah. Similar to the other one we spoke about, the one who's lazy, who for other reasons will not easily do teshuvah. Here you have another individual that will also have a difficult time doing teshuvah, meaning to repent, to correct his ways, to be a better person, to be a better husband, to be a better friend. Somebody who has that, it's a very difficult midah to conquer. I'm letting you know right now, even though we're going to talk about how to do that. And perhaps this midah should really be spoken about in more than one session, because there's so much to talk about. As you know, even the Goyim, the non-Jewish world, have a whole seminar about anger management. Even to them, it's something that is is something to be to tackle, something to be dealt with, because of its destructive force. But we are here concerned about, of course, our relationship with Hashem and our observance of the mitzvot, and also to be able to have a normal, decent life as parents, as a husband, as a wife. So that this midah, of course, affects everybody. So the Zohar says, if somebody has been infected with this midah, because he has become so impure, it will be difficult for him to sanctify himself, to make himself pure again, lekadesh tatzmo. However, if he does succeed, there's almost no one as holy as him. As it is mentioned in the pasuk, Tov erech apayim migibor umoshel berucho miloched ir. There are certain individuals who we look up to very much and admire. And it's not the one who runs 100 yards in 6 seconds. That's, the goyim admire that. It is not the one who threw the most baskets in basketball, or the one that has the most home runs. These are people we don't admire at all. This is not something to admire. You know who you should admire? Somebody who has exercised self-control. The pasuk says, better is, greater is, more to be admired an individual who is erech apayim, who controls himself, controls his anger, much more than one who's strong, who can lift 500 pounds in the Olympics. Umoshel berucho, one who's able to control his temper, is greater and more to be admired than somebody who's loched ir, the one who has conquered a city, than Napoleon. Who cares about these people? Those feats are not as admirable as one who controls himself, controls his anger. That is something really difficult to do. And if somebody succeeds in that, that is a real big accomplishment. But it's not easy. As the Zohar says, if he succeeds in doing that, he's really holy. He's been able to restore the holiness in his neshama. Therefore, Kohelet, which was also written by Shlomo HaMelech, tells us in the following pasuk, Ve'aser ka'as milibecha. Ve'aser ka'as milibecha means that you should always work on this midah of removing anger from your heart. Is he talking about only angry people? No. As you will soon see, we all have it. Some have it more, some have it less. I shouldn't really say we all have it, but we all have the potential of easily having it. So Kohelet says this is something that if you really want to get rid of, you have to continuously work on it. You have to continuously do something to rid yourself of this midah. If you do so, the other part of the pasuk says, "Ve'aver ra'a mibesarecha." Remove the evil from your flesh. That's what those words mean. Remove the evil, ra'a mibesarecha. What evil is he talking about? Well, you could say he's talking about the same thing. He's talking about anger. That's too simplistic. Ve'aver ra'a mibesarecha, the rabbis tell us, ra'a is Gehenom. This midah can lead a lot of people to end up in Gehenom. So you want to spare yourself Gehenom? Control your anger. Ve'aver ra'a mibesarecha, I wanted to add that since Shlomo HaMelech is using here the word basar, flesh, instead of nefesh, instead of neshama, instead of ruach, he's using flesh, perhaps he's also insinuating, haver ra'a, do yourself a favor. You don't want to get sick? Get rid of the anger. If you succeed in doing so, ve'aver ra'a mibesarecha, you will be sparing yourself or saving yourself from a lot of illnesses, ulcers, heart attacks, high blood pressure. Just read any article about anger in the internet or anywhere. What it does physically to the person at the time he's getting angry, we have no idea because we're not looking what's going on internally. If you look at somebody, perhaps you can see his colors changing. Yeah, that may be observable. The color changes to red. But you know what's going on inside? Terrible damage. Anybody here know what arteries, or I should say what organs get damaged from anger?
Liver.
That's right. How did you know the liver? You would think the heart. Why the liver? That's exactly what it is. The heart can also be affected, but the heart and the liver and the kidneys, all of these, there's certain organs that for some reason have a greater sensitivity because of the way they work and their function, that they are affected by it very, very, very much. And you wonder why a person has a particular illness. We don't always know. We blame genes, we blame diets. These are the things that we always blame. But do you know that Kabbalistically, there's a reason for why every particular organ is not functioning, why it's diseased, why there's a tumor growing there, why there's a hole there, why it's just not working the way it should. Valve replacement. Why? On a Kabbalistic level, there's an explanation, but we don't know. We don't always know. It may be possible to figure out, maybe, but it's not always easy to know, because Minashamayim, everything is controlled Mishamayim from heaven. And in the same way that a car these days has sensors of check engine, you need a tune-up, you have low tires, pressure, all kinds of sensors. You need more coolant, it's overheating, right? These sensors help us. Some people just ignore the sensors. And that's when the car, of course, heats up and just goes kaput. You know, you got to look around. That's what the sensors are for. They turn red, they blink at you, so you should remember to check it out. Well, the body also has sensors. You know, when something is wrong, you need to check it out with the doctor. Well, the Rambam says, in the same way that there's doctor for physical ailments, there's also doctors for the neshama, and they are the chachamim. All the terrible, the bad, the negative midot are in some ways compared to mahalot hanefesh, diseases of the soul, not of the body. And they have to be checked out. You can't just live your life leaving them alone. It will affect the quality of life, the quality of the marriage, the quality of your social life. Everything can be affected because of one's midot. A person could be he prays well. He prays well, he focuses, he concentrates. He does other mitzvot, he puts on tefillin early. I mean, he keeps a kosher home. The area of mitzvot between him and God is fine, more or less. But the area of between him and Chavero, his friends, his neighbors, is lacking. He's not honest, he's always upset, or he's jealous. All kinds of midot, chulshot, weaknesses. These areas need to be dealt with, they need to be treated. And of course, as we've said all along, one of the ways to deal with them is to continuously, regularly learn Musar. The learning of Musar or Jewish ethics at least opens up our eyes, at least it reminds us, it awakens us. Otherwise, unless we have a good friend who's going to point out our mistakes, why do I say a good friend and not a spouse? Anybody know? Because the husband is not going to listen to his wife. The wife is not necessarily going to listen to her husband. Not necessarily. If you have a good friend, as Rabbi Yonatan Eibshit, Zechet Tzadik Levracha, said, a good friend's criticism is worth more than 1,000 speeches of the rabbi. A good friend, when he tells you something, you know he means your well-being. He's not just criticizing you because he feels like it. He's a good friend. You know he's a good friend. So, get yourself a good friend. It's one of the best ways to find out about your weaknesses. And hopefully, we will listen to our good friends. So therefore, this particular midah causes a tremendous amount of damage, both physically and to the neshama. Even the chachamim, that the rabbis tell us that sometimes chachamim have what's called ritcha deoraita, they get upset. That anger, however, is coming from their learning. That is not a negative anger. Nevertheless, even on them, the Gemara says, calm down. Be careful with it. You may lose control. So even though the origin of their anger at times is ritcha deoraita, coming from a good source, even they, the chachamim, have to be careful. There is a Gemara that says there's several individuals that Hashem loves. He really likes them. There's some that he totally hates their guts. One of the ones that Hashem really loves is a person who never gets angry. He's a real good man. A good man is one who never gets angry. Now, what does it mean, never gets angry? Is that possible? You say, yes, it is possible, because it's one thing to be upset and another thing to show it on the surface. The real anger that we're talking about, even though it's no good to feel it inside, even though it's not healthy to to have a grudge because you're eating yourself up too. But here we're talking about an anger that is observable on the surface, which is even worse, because that's the one where you really lose control. So Hashem loves those who don't display anger, who don't do something as a result of their anger. In other words, that they exercise self-control. Anyone here who had a chance to learn Pirkei Avot, in Pirkei Avot they speak about the various kinds of anger. As I started off saying in the very beginning, there are different levels of anger. Some have more and some have less. Some hold on longer to it and some let go of it quickly. And this is what the rabbis tell us. These are the 4 types. You have one who's quick to anger, but he's quick to appease or quick to calm down. That's very nice. At least he calms down. You know what I call them? I call them the anger of Denver, Colorado. Why Denver, Colorado? Because when I first came to Denver, they told me, here, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. It changes. It could be snowing, cold, and then it's nice. And you can go out without a sweater. The weather changes there very, very much. So there are people who have this kind of weather pattern, that they're getting angry, 5 minutes later, you don't even remember they got angry. No, actually you remember, they don't. Yeah. They calm down very quickly. Is that good or bad? It's bad, but at least they calm down. Then there's one who is very rarely getting angry. Very rare, once like they say in a blue moon. But whenever he gets angry, stay away from him. He's not going to calm down. He's not easily forgiving. I mean, very difficult to appease him. So the rabbis say, well, at least his gain is that he doesn't get angry as often. But when he does get angry, it's very, very bad. Now, of these 2 that I just mentioned, which one do you think is worse? The one that gets angry often but comes down very quickly, or the one that takes many, many months or years to get angry? It takes something really, really tough to anger him and upset him. But when he does get upset, it's very hard to calm him down. Which one is worse? Now, which one is better? Which one is? They're both no good. Which one is worse?
First one.
We always hear various opinions, but the rabbis tell us the first one is worse. The one who's always getting angry is the worst, because he's always getting angry, and that is a terrible midah. Terrible midah, terrible characteristic. So if you're always getting angry, you're worse off than the one that gets angry once in a while, even though it's hard to appease him. Who are the other 2? The one who gets angry very often, and he's difficult to appease, he's a rasha. He has a large dose of anger. He doesn't understand how dangerous it is. He's not forgiving. He loses out the most. He's a rasha, they call him. And the other one, the 4th one, is one who's slow to anger and quick to appease and calm down. And he's the tzaddik. So the righteous man, the one that Hashem likes, the one that we just mentioned, that he's one of Hashem's favorite people, is the one who rarely gets angry. And even if he did, he's quick to appease. He calms down quickly. In the same way that we admire, the Shlomo Melech brings out how special these people are who control themselves, in the same way we feel sorry and we feel bad for those who get angry very often. As the pasuk says, Ka'as behek kesilim yanuach. Those who do get angry regularly, it is indicative of some foolishness in them. Because the kas behek kesilim yanuach. Hek means it is to be found amongst the foolish. If he were smart, he wouldn't be so angry. The word smart is really not an accurate word, because there's a difference between a chacham and a smart person. Chacham means he's knowledgeable, he knows the truth. A smart person, when we use the word smart, we could be talking about somebody who's just quick. He's a good mind. Here I'm talking about somebody who understands. He's not just a chacham, he's knowledgeable. So the opposite of one who's knowledgeable is a fool. An individual who has a lot of anger in him, the pasuk says, it is because there's a lot of foolishness in him. And I'm going to get to it a little bit later, why that is so. First, I'm trying to give you a little bit of a synopsis, of an overview of what is said about this midah, And as we have done with the other midot, we will go into the next step of identifying where this comes from and why it happens to people. And the step 3, how to deal with it, how to cure it, how to control it. So because ka'as, anger, is indicative of some foolishness, the pasuk says, Al tevahel beruchacha lichos. Don't be quick to anger, because you may come across as a foolish person. People will see, that you have no control. It's a giveaway. It says a lot about a person. Therefore, the Rambam, in speaking about midot, about character, when it comes to ka'as, he says, do your best not even to get angry, even about things that you may get angry. There are times that you're supposed to show that you're upset. But when you do show that you're upset, it should only be on the surface, on the outside. Make believe, like to your children, so they shouldn't repeat the mistake. But deep inside, be calm. So that's what the Rambam says. Be careful, even at the times that you need to be upset, or that you need to show that you're upset. Even then, be careful. Don't easily get angry. Stay away as much as possible from this midah called ka'as. Okay, this is pretty much an overview, the overview of what this midah is. So now let's talk about where this comes from. And this is fascinating because there's a lot of studies done about where it comes from, how it forms. And we all do know that it comes about for different reasons. There's different things that will anger different people. But what is the source of it? And all these experts in the world, even though a lot of what they say is true, psychologically, they don't really know the source of it. The source of anger, we have to turn to the Kabbalah again, is from the Sitra Achara. Let's call it a negative energy that is in this world, that comes about as a result, as the Zohar says, of the Sitra Achara floating around in this world, trying to make people get angry. That's what the Zohar says. In other words, there's a certain negative energy coming from the impure forces that is in this world that somehow gets people angry. So there's a question. Can animals get angry? Anybody want to answer this question? There's a discussion about this amongst the experts. Can animals, or do animals get angry?
Yes.
No.
You've had an animal that you know that? Okay, so listen carefully to what you said. You try to take away the kittens from the mother, but that's defensive. That's instinct. Okay? It's not anger. Okay? I knew somebody would give that example. They don't really have anger. For somebody to become angry, you need to make a decision to become angry. What's interesting about all these midot that we're learning, that I may not have explained recently, what's interesting about them is that they're only human. The human being, because of his neshama, is capable of having midot. Love. Love is a beautiful midah. It's a certain koach, a certain energy, a certain ability. Eventually we'll talk about it. Ahava. That is not amongst the animals. It doesn't exist. To love and hate, to help, to get angry. These midot, or tchushot, as we call them in Hebrew, feelings, in quotes, is something that belongs to human beings as a result of the neshama. Animals don't have feelings. They have instinct. The animalistic instinct is protective. That's the way Hashem made it. It's programmed. It's protective of its young. Just about every animal is. Just about every animal is. Some less, some more, some react differently. Right? They're hungry, so they attack and they want to eat. Right? They can become very aggressive, right, in their instinct, but that's aggressive instinct. It's not that they've made a decision. Okay, now I'm upset at that guy. I'm gonna, do something about it. A decision is required, and only human beings can make decisions. Only we have free will. So we make decisions whether to get angry or not. Not that we're thinking about it every moment, but deep down a decision has been made. And it's a quick decision. So animals don't really get angry. Human beings do.
You mentioned love and hate.
Yes?
I mean, that I can understand.
Yeah, well, all the midot. Love and hate, all the midot.
But still as a...
Yes. Go ahead.
How do you know that your anger is not your anger, but a person's anger? How do you know that that's not instinctual?
We have certain instincts, okay? Of course we have certain instincts, and I'm going to be talking about them soon. They're not really called instincts. They're inclinations. There are certain tendencies that form part of our nature, and I'm going to explain that soon. But they are controllable. That's the big difference. They are controllable. Okay, we're also protective. We also want to survive and run away from danger. So you may call it instinct too, okay? But they are more controllable. We have control over them. Instinct is something that all living forms have to a certain degree. But by us, it is controllable. That's the big difference.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
why does the Setratra, like you said, floats? Rabbi said it floats around. Why does it seem to float around right before Shabbos is coming on? Why does it
That's a good point, and I wasn't sure if to talk a little bit about it because otherwise the lecture can go on and on and on. But there's a lot of talk about this in the Zohar and elsewhere. How it's especially important not to get angry on Shabbat. There are certain times when the Sitra Achara tries to increase the volume, or in other words, attempt to disrupt the Kedusha. And as soon as we're entering the Shabbat, there's much more Kedusha in the world. So Fridays is the worst day for anybody who has a home and a wife and children. So many things can go wrong, and so many fights and anger. All of that can happen on a Friday more than any other day because of what I just said. The Sitra Achara is responsible for that. When I say responsible, I'm not saying that she is causing it, but she is instigating it. The difference is that there's something out there that tempts us, right? That steers it up. And if we don't take control, and if we're not calm, we can easily lose it. So there are certain times that this is more observable. Anyway, so the Sitra Achara, of course, is something that we do not see. It's something that the Zohar explains, that it's a negative energy that attempts to mislead people. These are the key words here. To mislead. That's the job it's supposed to do. That's the Yetzer Hara. To mislead people. And there are various forms of Yetzer Hara, and this is one of them. But this is a very powerful one. Now, the real background or the real origin of what brings about people's anger, or what the ultimate culprit is not necessarily the Sitra Achara. That's where it all originates. But the one that actually brings it up to the surface on a regular basis is what we call in Hebrew Mizgo shel Adam. Mizgo shel Adam, I think in English would be translated his temperament. Now, before I explain what temperament means, there is a possibility for people to get angry not because of their temperament and not because of the Sitra Achara, but only because they're Kohanim. Or because they're from Morocco. Imagine if you have a Kohen from Morocco, right? And also if you're from Iran, if you're from Isfahan. Yeah. Anyway, there are people, there are individuals that the rabbis tell us, because they're so serious and because they're so careful, Kohanim used to have to be very, very zariz, very diligent. You hear, Yitzhak? You have to be very diligent in your work. You have to be very careful. There should be no psul. That your avodah, your service in the Bet HaMikdash should not be disqualified or invalidated. And because of that, the Kohanim were always quick. So that quickness, that alertness, that vigilance and diligence brought about a certain amount of anger in their genes. So in some ways it's good, but in some ways you have to control yourself. So what is temperament? Temperament is a very fascinating area because we spent quite a few weeks discussing the various mazalot, the various astrological signs, and how each one has certain strengths and weaknesses. And in the very beginning I said that anger belongs to everyone. Anger is something that can exist in every individual, some more and some less. the trick over here is to figure out what's making him angry. Because what makes you angry will not make me angry. And that will depend on the mizgo, on the temperament of the person. There's also a pasuk says, for example, Ki berov chokhmah rav ka'as. The more knowledgeable a person is, the more he knows the truth, the more he's upset at people. It has nothing to do with his temperament. It's simply because of what he knows and he sees how much corruption there is. That can anger him too. But the makeup of a person is really the most responsible for the anger. The makeup meaning the temperament. So I'm going to quickly go through the 4 elements. If you remember in astrology, the 4 elements of fire, air, earth, and water, and show you why each one of them gets angry. They all get angry. They all can get angry for different reasons. There's something deeper that brings about this anger. And because of this inborn or embedded characteristics that are there from birth, they somehow awaken if you press the wrong button. If you step on someone on the small toe, he may get very, very upset. It may take somebody else for you to not step on his toe, but to just do something else to press that same button of anger. So anybody who consists of the fire element. Elements, for those of you who don't remember, we all have all 4 elements. Some have more fire, some have more air, some have more water, some have more earth. Different elements, different makeup, different character, different nature. Those who have the most fire, Leos and Sagittarius and Aries, especially if they have a lot of that, abundance of fire, they have a tremendous amount of energy. Because of the great amount of energy in them, they don't always think before they do something. They're impulsive. They can be. They're quick. So there's no hashiva. A person can therefore do something quickly, react without too much thought. So this is something happening to him. If he's getting angry, it could be because there was not so much thought. It could also be because he has a hard time controlling himself. There's certain signs in the element of fire, because it's fire. Fire, how are you going to control fire? Look, the firemen have a tremendous hard time. How do you control a fire? It gets sometimes out of control. Fire sometimes is not controllable. So this midah of if you have a tremendous amount of fire, a person sometimes just loses control over himself. It's sometimes energy that is not well directed, not well channeled, or it could be an individual who's not very realistic. He has certain ideas, he wants certain things very, very much, but he's not always realistic. He may want things, but they can't be done, and that gets him upset. Or there's a lack of patience. And all of this goes along with fire because he's so quick, he wants things to get done, he's not patient. So these are the things that are pushing him or triggering the anger. We're not talking about the very, very source, we're talking about what is triggering or what is bringing up the anger to the surface. Those that have a tremendous amount of the air element, it could be that what's triggering, I'm saying it could be because not everyone should be accused of having this midot. It all depends how much of it. And there's always a potential there. A large amount of air has a potential for arrogance. And when a person has arrogance, then what's triggering his anger can be linked to the arrogance. It could be self-confident, it could be nervousness. Air has certain degree of nervousness, indifference towards people and situations, and because of that he's angry. Or because he's air, he's mental, he's just not in agreement with what somebody else is saying or doing. He's actually going to be argumentative because the mind is working here. The mind is getting him upset. The sechel is the one that's producing or triggering the anger. Earth, the earth, what could earth people have as a trigger? Stubbornness, kapdanut, being very, very strict to perfection, lack of flexibility. They don't want to change, they don't want to move. And that's going to upset them if somebody tries to do that to them. Yeah, go over to someone who has earth and try to move his stuff into another room. You're going to get over your head. Being very conservative in their views. And sometimes because they want security. And if they don't have that, they feel very uncomfortable and very uneasy, which is a form of anger too, at themselves or others. Anger sometimes is self-directed too. Water. Water has a certain uneasiness about certain things. He's not comfortable sometimes. He's very pagia. In English we would say that very easily hurt. Pagia means very easily hurt. He has a tremendous imagination. He's victimized. People take advantage of him. Lacking of self-confidence. These are the kinds of characteristics or aspects of his nature that can trigger. If somebody took advantage of him, first he didn't realize, how come I fell for it? How come I was so naive? Well, that's the way the water person is. That he can't change. He has to be very careful not to be taken advantage of, because that's going to make him very upset. You know what the danger here is? When some people get upset and they don't understand what happened, and the person who made them upset is religious, they vent their anger towards religion. There could be a tremendous Chilul Hashem here. That guy did it to me, that guy with a long beard. You see what I mean? There is a problem here of taking things out of proportion, of not really seeing what exactly happened, only because they were victimized. So they take it worse, they take it very, very badly. So the ones who have a lot of water because of the imagination, because of being easily hurt, the feelings here take things out of proportion and easily can anger them. They will not be quick to anger necessarily, like the fire, right? We're not talking about speed over here, we're just talking about the trigger. And what makes some people angry will not make other people angry. It all depends on the makeup, on their temperament. So, how do we choose our friends? Is there any way one can choose a friend? Is there any tested way that a person can know what kind of an individual the person is? Is there any test that we can give him? When you enter college, you go to school, there's various IQ tests. There's all kinds of exams, psychological exams. What kind of a test could you give, or how could you get to know a person well to know if you should be his friend or not? Rabbis tell us you can recognize an individual in 3 ways. Give him a test, 3 tests. Bekiso, bekoso, ubekaaso. You can look at it, give him an exam with his pocket. What does that mean? See how he spends his money. Is he stingy? Is he generous? In other words, how does he use his money? Kiso means pocket. Koso, when he drinks. What does it mean when he drinks? There's 2 things you can tell about a person when he drinks. First of all, if he drank a lot, he's going to tell you all his secrets when he's drunk. And if he drinks a lot, then you know that he's a drinker. So how a person eats and drinks tells you a little bit about him. But the one we're talking about tonight is bekaso. Make him angry. Make him angry. And see how he reacts. If he tells you how upset he is, what bothered him, if he's honest with you, that's good. If he doesn't get angry about small little things, there's a lot you can tell about a person, therefore, through his anger. See what angers him. You know where this can come in very handy? For all those you who are still single. You're dating a girl, dating a boy. And you go to eat with him in a restaurant. See how generous. Does he give a tip? How does he deal with the waiter? Is he kind to him? Is he demanding? Does he have chutzpah? How does he speak? Is he in his speech? While he's eating, so you have the atmosphere of a restaurant. So you can check him there in all 3. How is he going to eat? How is he going to drink? How is he going to use his money? And if he's going to get angry, everything in the restaurant. There's a lot you can tell when a person is eating. You can tell how he drives too. Now, what I don't recommend to do is what the following girl did to a boy on her date. As soon as they stopped by a traffic light, she took out the keys from the ignition. She took out the keys from the ignition. And the guy said to her, give him back. Well, give him back. I gotta go, I gotta drive. And she doesn't give it to him. So he had to demand, give me back my keys. Finally, she gives him back the keys. And then she asks him, okay, so where are we going tonight? We're going home right now. Well, who would want to? Yeah. What kind of a test do you do that?
You stop the traffic and everything?
No. That was not a very smart test. In the middle of traffic to take out, she wanted to test his anger. She wanted to see, how he would react. Come on, this is not the kind of test you want to try out. That's a little bit too much, so don't try that one, or you lose your date. Yeah.
Besides, it's dangerous to everybody else too.
Right. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about why people get angry. We spoke about the triggers. What is causing them to get angry? Not just the trigger, not the source of the anger, but what is it exactly? What are the reasons for people to get upset and angry? And we said that the reasons can be different depending on the situation. There's all kinds of reasons. There's not one reason, but we need to identify some of them so that we can know how to deal with it. If we don't understand the problem, then we won't know how to deal with him. As a famous psychologist, his name was Carl Jung, said something like this: when something leads you to anger, you can learn a lot about yourself. In other words, if you follow what led you to get angry, you will be able to know a lot about yourself. And that's the idea over here. We need to learn about ourselves by observing what is it exactly that gets angry and what does make people angry. The most simple explanation of what makes people angry is that things do not come out the way they wanted it to come out. As we say in Hebrew, "Advarim lo mistadrim." Things do not come out to be according to our wishes. On a very simplistic level, things are not just working out the way we want them to work out, the way we'd like things to be, right? Our ratzon and the metziut, our will and the reality, are not the same. What we want is not what we see, is not what we get. This is the very simple idea behind what makes people upset. Now, why does this happen? Why should this make a person upset? Because he does not fully understand, he does not comprehend the reality the way he should. For if he would understand, he would not really get upset. Because we do not understand reality, because we do not fully understand what life is all about, because we don't understand why Hashem does things, for those of us who are religious, because of that we get upset. If we were to know the reasons, then we would judge things differently. We would not take things out of proportion. So a great deal of the problem has to do with not fully understanding what is happening. Whoever told you that what you think is bad is bad? And by the way, what is bad? Why is there bad or evil in the world? Did you ever think about that? These are things that people do not think about a lot. Whoever told you this is bad, maybe this is the way things need to be. Do we really have an understanding of why Hashem does things? We can never know fully, 100%, why Hashem does certain things to us. It takes a tremendous amount of learning and training for one to convince himself that he has no control over everything. When things happen to him, perhaps it was meant to be. It's min hashamayim. There are no coincidences. It takes a tremendous amount of self-reflection to reflect on what is happening, to be able to have a better grasp of the situation. But people do not do that. They don't stop to think, wait a minute, let me analyze this. If they did, they would react differently. But that's what it takes. It takes a little bit of analysis. Why should I get upset? Perhaps this is going to be something that there's going to be some benefit from. Remember the story with the people who were working in the Twin Towers and they got fired 2 weeks before September 11? 2 weeks before September 11, some Jews got fired. They were working on the 100th floor of the Twin Towers. They all had several children, large families. That would make them very upset. They were not only probably upset, they were despondent. They were, sad. disappointed, all the terrible midot that you can think of. But what did they find out 2 weeks later? That it was all for their benefit. And I gave you this example when we spoke about midat bitachon, to be trusting of Hashem, to rely on Hashem, to remember that everything is for some good that is unknown to us at a given moment. Later on, we may be privileged to find out what that benefit was. But one who is upset, what is he showing? What we said before, he's showing foolishness, he's showing ignorance. He's having a hard time reconciling, obviously, what is happening, because he doesn't have a good understanding of the mitzvot, of the reality. When a person, of course, does not have a good understanding of what is going on, he feels lacking. Similar to the one who was jealous. When we spoke about jealousy, we said that deep down, he feels a certain lack of something. He's lacking. But wait a minute, if you were to believe that everything you're supposed to have, Hashem gave you, you wouldn't be lacking. This is the way Hashem wants it to be. So why should I feel lacking? Hashem wanted me to have or not to have. So why should there be any feeling of lacking? Yes, the stomach feels it's lacking when it's hungry. But that's good. That's to remind you to go eat something. Take care of your body. Yes?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
It's just about what you said. But isn't that thought of like, okay, what I have is Hashem and that's it and that's what I deserve, isn't that deterring from like being really ambitious and doing stuff and being like...
That's a very good question. Yeah, let me paraphrase it. And sorry to cut you off short,
No,
but just
yeah.
to that. But this is a question that was raised in the past, a very valid question. On the one hand, we are being told to be calm, to be accepting, to not worry, to just remind ourselves that this is what Hashem wants. After all, He is not only the creator of the world, He supervises the world. He knows what's best for me. This is the way it needs to be. Nevertheless, we are told, on the other hand, to aspire and to pray for Hashem to remove these illnesses, to make efforts, because we do not know what is required of us to change the situation. So the feeling of complacency, of being just calm, that is only after we did all our efforts. So long as we did not attempt to take the patient to the doctor, to acupuncture, to all the efforts that we can possibly do, we don't know if we've done everything. If we've done everything we possibly can, we don't give up on prayer. That is when we turn to prayer. And if prayer does not work, we say, well, that's apparently what Hashem wants that it should be. In other words, we don't know what He wants until we've tried everything. After we've made our attempts in praying and doing and saying and whatever, we filled out our resume, we applied for a job, we went for an interview. What they didn't accept. They didn't accept. Obviously, it wasn't meant to be. But I don't know until I go for the interview. I don't know until I make the effort. Did I answer the question? Yeah. Okay, so once we've done everything, then we have to believe, we have to accept that this is the way it needs to be. Min hashamayim. So what is really happening to a person who's getting angry is a lack of knowledge and a lack of shlemut in himself. He doesn't feel complete. He doesn't feel that he's happy, obviously. And that is, of course, making him upset. Now, let's take the next example. Let's take a typical example. Conflicts between husband and wife. Getting upset at each other. This is quite common, right? Do you know that most of the time the conflicts between them, the issues, are because they are somewhat different? Is there anything wrong with being different? You know, people are different. A lot of the issues between them is because of that they don't understand each other. There's no reason to get upset at someone just because you didn't understand them. You know what? Sit down and have a talk. Communicate, and perhaps you realize, but wait a minute, she thinks differently than I do. She has different preferences. He likes this, she likes that. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you have to reach a compromise if you want to get along. That's something else. I'm not talking about that. Obviously, you're going to have to find a solution. You're going to need a compromise. But there's nothing wrong with having differences of opinion. It happens all the time. Especially when we're talking about different backgrounds. We're talking about different temperaments, different individuals. And guess what? When you get married, you have to learn Swahili. You know what that is? Swahili? Yeah. That's a language spoken in East Africa. In Kenya they speak that. The reason I say Swahili is because when a man marries a woman, he has to learn a different language. And that language is very, very different than anything he has heard before. So I compare it to Swahili. You have to learn a new language, the language of the woman. And the woman, when she gets married, she has to learn a new language, the language of the man. They speak different languages. That's just a fact, yes.
Rabbi, but I think it's very important that you reiterate what you talked about in your previous year, Making Marriage Work, about how to handle a fiery, temperamental, angry person, how the other...
I'm going to get to that, yeah. We're going to talk about, when we get to solutions, the next step, a couple, 2, 3, 4 minutes, we'll talk a little bit about that. All right? So here we're talking about issues that come up between husband and wife that are really trivial, that can be dealt with very easily. Most of the time, anger is not rational. When people get angry, they're not being rational. And that in itself already gives you a clue as to what may help a person who has anger. Be rational. Be logical. Tishtamesh bekoach higayon, as we say in Hebrew. Use higayon, use logic, use reason. Because many times, the anger is not reasonable, it's not rational, it's not logical. It's not. So if you were to use that against it, you would weaken it. It will help somebody calm down once you introduce logic. So logic is one of the tools that can help. Rabbis tell us that a person should begin to think about his anger in the following way. You got angry, what did you gain? Nothing except for your anger. The anger will not produce gain. It usually does not produce any gain. No benefit came out of it. So think about that. Trying to work on yourself, trying to work on this midah. Lo alta lo ella ragzanuto. The ka'asan did not gain only ragzanuto, only his anger. That's all he got. He got from it. From the whole fight, all that he benefited was anger. No real other benefit. So what is really required, now that we're going to talk a little bit about making a change and trying to get some control of the anger, what is required, as one psychologist said, what is required is to restructure our thoughts and beliefs. I like that term that he uses. Restructuring of our thoughts and beliefs. It requires a complete changeover of the way we think and what we believe in. And even though he wasn't speaking about religion, we as Jews, of course, we have Hashem and we think differently and we look at life differently. The idea is still the same. We need to restructure ourselves in introducing all kinds of other beautiful midot that will help calm us down, that will help rid us of this anger. Let's take an individual who's always disappointed. Disappointment is a form of anger. He's upset. Why is he disappointed? Perhaps if he thought about it, because he always has demands and expectations. Okay? If he were to analyze it, he would find that his disappointments come from demands and expectations. Well, that's very easy to fix. Instead of demanding and expecting, all you should have is certain wants and desires and preferences. If you don't get your way, you didn't get your way. But what made you disappointed and upset and angry? Because it was demands. The word demand exists in your vocabulary instead of, I would like to have. What's for dinner? Chicken soup. Well, he demanded something else, and because he got something that he did not want or demand or expect, he's going to get upset at his wife. Chicken soup, or whatever it is, right? He wants something else. Instead, think a little bit. Retrain your thoughts. I would like to have, I would prefer. And if it turns out that that's not what was made, well, tonight instead of having steak, you'll have hot dogs. Dinner is not ready, well, guess what? Make your own. And if you don't know how to make your own, guess what? Go buy yourself some dinner. And don't be upset, just accept it. Something kept your wife busy that she couldn't manage and didn't get to it, that's all. It was not out of ill will. It was not out of revenge. It was not that she was out to get you. Well, that's what the husband may think when he comes home tired and hungry. You know what a hungry man looks like? A hungry man, a tired and hungry man. So You know, a wife, of course, has to be very careful with that because that's a very sensitive spot for certain men. So, you don't want to become disappointed. Don't have demands and expectations. You may have wants and desires and preferences. Now, another idea is sometimes we really have a problem. And we're upset that the problem is not fixed. Sir, who told you that this particular problem has a solution? Some problems don't have real solutions. They don't. I mean, chas v'shalom, God forbid. God forbid. If somebody is stuck with a child or a spouse who's very gravely ill, are they going to abandon him or her? Some have done that, by the way. They're cruel. But is that a reason to abandon them? Of course not. It's a problem. And you have to learn, perhaps get training on how to deal with a parent who's handicapped. They took care of you. They took care of you up to the age of 17 and 18. Can't you take care of them when they are in their elderly years and they're physically handicapped? They show patience and love for you. Can't you show patience and love for them? We're taking turns now. That's what happens in life sometimes. But wait a minute. No, you forgot about that. Know that they took care of you, they fed you, they clothed you, they did everything for you till you got married. You can't return that to them. Some people don't have the patience. They dump their parents in a convalescent home, in an old age home. Right? And they're angry. They lose their patience. So some situations are problematic. They don't have a solution. You got to deal with them as best as you can. Don't expect that there's a solution and a quick fix for every problem. You got to live with it sometimes. Another idea that is very helpful when a person sees that he's really losing it very often is to ask himself, you know, what am I going to get out of this? It's only going to hurt me. It's only going to be a waste of time. It really doesn't pay. Do I really need this? Is this really something important that I have to get upset about? Husband and wife, they have to make a decision. What kind of piece of furniture to buy for their dinette? And somehow they get into a big fight because of that. And it's not because of the money, it's because of colors and styles. Is this really something worth fighting about? Ask yourself. There's so many examples like this in our life that people get upset for things that are totally not worthy of being upset about. They're so trivial, they're so unimportant. So ask yourself, watch yourself, stop yourself. Is this something really worth arguing about? It's a waste of time. It's only going to hurt me. It's going to hurt her. It's going to hurt our relationship. Ask yourself this question. Another idea that can be very helpful is when a person is really faced with a predicament that he has no control and can't deal with it. Ask others, how would you have dealt with it? What would you do? Don't try to figure it out yourself. People lose patience, get upset and angry because they try to do it themselves. Call an expert. When you have a plumbing problem, don't try to fix it yourself if you don't really know what you're doing. You're going to make more damage. Call an expert. Ask others, how would you have dealt with it? What would you do? You know that there's something called counseling? Sometimes it's necessary. When the two people cannot deal with it on their own, they can't get themselves out of this problem, go to a counselor. Go get counseling. Here are some ideas that I found from experts who claim that they work. I haven't tried them, so, you know, I'm just quoting what they've said. Take a deep breath. If you find yourself getting angry, take a deep breath for a while and count from 1 to 20 or from 1 to 30. And some people need to count from 1 to 100 maybe. Yeah, maybe, because to 20 it's not enough. They got so upset. But that's what they say. Count, take a deep breath. You know, these things can't hurt. You know, and they may help. They may help. Another very good idea, and this I've really seen work, is you see that you're getting angry, go for a walk. Go outside to the porch. Go to the backyard. Go do some gardening. Go listen to some music. Go out. In other words, don't stay where you are and continue what you were doing and talk what you were talking about, because you're going to lose control. Immediately go ahead and do something else, something that you enjoy. Music is very therapeutic. It helps a lot. What do we do, however, if we're not the ones that are getting angry? This is one of my favorite. But we're dealing with somebody who is angry at us. How do we deal with that?
Yeah.
Right? I just gave you some clues on how to deal if we are angry. What if the guy is angry at us? Whether it's a spouse or somebody else. What do we do then? Hmm? First of all, it's very important. It's very important to maintain calm. Remember, if he's a fire sign, he's going to calm down in 5 minutes anyway. The anger that he has in him is just going to disappear. And he even will ask you, did I get angry? They totally forget about their anger. If it's somebody that gets angry often, they calm down usually often. It doesn't pay to get into a big fight just at that moment, because in about 3-4 minutes, not that much more, it's just going to go away. Another thing is that you can do is don't stare them in the eye. If you stare them in the eye, it somehow gets them more upset. Look away a little bit. Sometimes one of the best cures with angry people is just keep your mouth shut. Keep quiet. Let them vent it out, and little by little, they will calm down. What if he's not around? What if that individual is somebody that we're very upset about? We're upset at him. He's not around. Is there any way that we can no longer be angry at him for what he did? This is a different situation where the two people are not together, the two are apart, but one is upset at someone. Can he stop being upset at him? One way to do it is the rabbis tell us always look at his positive traits and qualities. Everybody has something good. Did he ever do you a favor in the past? If we start thinking about the good that he has done for us in the past, if we start focusing on the good that he has, it will calm us down. It will force us to look away from his faults. So if we have somebody that we are angry for good reason, we're talking about for good reason, not for foolish reasons, and you don't want to feel upset at someone, you don't want to be angry towards anyone, then think of all the good that he has done, hopefully he did some, and focus on his good qualities. It requires a tremendous amount of patience. Anybody who works for a boss, or who has workers, people who are getting very, very upset, it takes a tremendous amount of patience to deal with them. Be a good listener. That's another advice that they tell us. Be a good listener. Listen to what he's got to say. Don't be defensive. If somebody tries to criticize you, he's upset, don't try to be defensive. Just listen to the criticism. These are small tricks that can help diffuse the situation if you're dealing with somebody who gets very angry. Another very important piece of advice between husband and wife: time your discussions for the appropriate time. It's not a good idea for a woman to come and make demands of her husband as soon as he's come home. The minute he steps over the door, after a long day and he's hungry, begin to make demands. This is not the time to make demands. This is not the time to have a discussion. Neither should you make a discussion with your wife at the most tense time of the day. Husband and wives, if they're going to have a discussion, which is important in communication, do it at a good time where there's no tension, no kids running around. Not when one of you is tired, not when there's tension. I saw one example in one of the books of an individual who recommended to give mommy 15 minutes free time when she comes, if she's a working mother, when she comes home. Don't attack her, don't ask her for anything. Give her 15 minutes of time. Because that's the worst time when she just came home, if she's working, to ask of her to do all kinds of things. She'll get upset, nervous. So if you time things right, you're going to be better off. Our rabbis were great examples. There's a lot for us to learn from our rabbis, what they did. There's one individual, however, who stands out in the Gemara. Incredible. His name is Hillel. You know who was Hillel? No matter how much you try to get him upset and angry, you could never succeed. There's many examples and stories of how people made a bet between each other. You can see, I'm going to make him upset. And they lost the bet because they didn't get him upset. You know what could make him upset? And they tried this. Hillel was a big rabbi. Right before Shabbat, 5 minutes before Shabbat, they came and asked him a big question. They said it was a big question.
Actually, it wasn't a big question.
It turned out to be, why are the feet of African natives so wide? You know, something like, what does that have to do with the price of cheese in China? You know, why are you asking me that right now? 5 minutes before Shabbat, take a shower, gotta get ready. But that, of course, they did it intentionally. What do you think Hillel did? He answered them calmly. He actually gave them an answer, an explanation of why the natives in Africa, you know, have broad feet or whatever. All kinds of questions like that. So that the question is, where did he take that calmness from? How did he do it? His anava, his humbleness. And we spoke about humbleness. Humbleness is a beautiful midah. If one trains himself to become humble, he can take a lot of flack, as they say in English. He can deal with a lot of tough situations. Humbleness. What do we do if the kids are upset? What do we do if somebody who's very close to us is upset? How do we get him to stop being upset? Not how do we deal, in other words, not how do we defend ourselves, but how do we get him to not be upset? This one I've tried myself, okay? Use humor. Joke. Somebody's upset, you need to release the tension in the house. You have girls, they fight a lot, the girls. You got to release the tension. I go over to them and I tickle them. That somehow releases the tension on the spot. It gets them to laugh. They get upset at me sometimes when I do that, but at least I got them to stop being angry. I got them to stop fighting. It worked. It actually works. Right? So release the tension, a joke, some humor, distract them, change the subject. You're dealing with somebody who's very, very argumentative, very upset, he can't control himself, change the subject. That's another trick. It works. It works. Sometimes they'll catch on to it. Why'd you change the subject? But by then they've calmed down already, so it works. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Another very important idea when you speak to people, speak to them calmly. Divrei chachamim benachat nishma'im. They are heard and they are accepted if you say them calmly. Don't yell at anybody. Speaking quietly, I think it's the Rambam or others who say, is a good strategy of calming yourself, getting rid of the anger, and not getting somebody else angry. So speaking quietly is a very effective tool of having people listen to you and making sure they don't get angry.
Who's the Geras of Ramban?
Yeah.
The son.
The son, yeah. And for you too. If you speak calmly, get used to speaking calmly, it also helps with the anger. There was a rabbi who once, from time, it can happen to anyone. His wife told him that when he came home, your son broke something, a crystal. And it was an expensive crystal. What did he do to control himself? He was going to now yell at his son. So he came up with a very innovative idea. He didn't say anything until the next day. By the next day, his rebuke was not out of anger. It was a lesson. He taught his son a lesson. Had he immediately gone to his room after his wife told him, your son broke this, he would have been very upset. So he thought of a very good idea. Let me wait one day. And the rabbis tell us, sleep over it. When you sleep over something, you'll have more control over it. So this is a good idea not to immediately react when you hear something wrong. Yeah. I saw an interesting idea. I haven't tried it, but it is brought down in the name of Rav Chaim Volozhin, a person who's very upset, has a hard time calming down, should say to himself, En od milvado, many, many times. The Torah words, that there's no one else but Hashem. That these words, En od milvado, if you repeat it time after time, have a tremendous energy, power to calm a person down. En od, there's nothing but Him. In other words, He controls everything. He's the boss. That's what you're saying here in these words. En od milvado. That is another good idea. And as I said earlier on, learning Musar is something imperative on a regular basis, especially learning and getting used to the midat of simcha, of joy, of happiness. These are things that will help us indirectly with with kas. Instead of attacking kas, anger directly, there are ways to go around it. And one of them is by developing more simcha, more happiness. What I want to finish with is a very nice saying that I saw that is very, very true. And that is, control anger before it controls you. Control anger before it controls you. Because that's what happens. Going back to what we said in the very beginning, a person who gets angry loses complete control. It's a terrible midah because you have no control. You've lost your free will. You've lost who you are. And people regret it very, very much later on. If they have any sechel, they regret it that they ever got angry. So don't regret it. Don't get angry to begin with. Retain your control. And the best way, of course, to do that is by continuously working on this midah. It's not a quick fix. It requires continuous amount of work in restructuring our hashkafot, in our outlook of life, in how we see things, and in acquiring certain habits of calmness and talking softly, and being more understanding, more patient, listening better. These are the kinds of things that will actually help us. And as I said in the beginning, one who really controls himself, one who really does his best to channel, his energy in a positive way, he is holy. He is somebody to be admired. And most of all, his quality of life will be better. He will be a healthier person. He will have a healthier marriage and a healthier life. Amen.
I just remembered right now that